Welcome to Pandas Nightmares. Today you will hear some paranormal and horrifying scary stories related directly or indirectly to the events that happened on 9th of September 2001. If you do like my content, do like and subscribe as it will help me grow. Thank you in advance, and now let's get started. Story 1. A friend of mine's father travels a lot for work, usually by flying. A number of years ago, he began having strange dreams where he was on a plane that was apparently being hijacked. He heard people screaming and passengers and crew being stabbed. Eventually, the dream ends with the plane apparently crashing, as there was fire all around him. It was obviously very disturbing for him, particularly because he flies so often. The dreams were a recurring thing, happening probably once or twice a month for about a year. Then the dreams ramped up in occurrence to maybe twice or 3 times a week, and then they stopped. Just as the dream started, it just as easily ended. This was in the summer of 2001. My friend's father never had the dream again. Now here's what's strange. My friend's father was scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 from Logan Airport on September 11th. On his way to the airport, his taxi broke down, and by the time he reached Logan, the plane had departed without him. He often wonders if somehow he was viewing the final moments of the passengers on the flight he missed. Story 2. My family has a lot of psychics. Living with my grandma is chaotic because of all the activity attracted to her. My mum inherited a bunch of it from her but actively shuts it down as she kept seeing traumatic things. I'll provide many more details if anyone wants. However, the week before the attacks, my mum was just shaken, just scared. She had 4 kids, all under the age of 12, and nothing scared her. I was the eldest, and I asked her what was going on because she was just so out of it. She said she'd been feeling like she was being slapped all week and couldn't figure it out. She'd turn a corner and feel her face burn like she'd been hit by an open palm, is how she described it. She said she was never upset at the feeling, just overwhelmed with sadness. The morning of 9/11, she said she woke up in a fog, could barely function. Just kept feeling that same slapped feeling, and then as the day went on and developed, it stopped. She hasn't felt it since, and had never felt it before. Story 3. My dad worked for the army as a contractor and was supposed to be in the Pentagon that day. This wasn't anything new for him, since he worked in Crystal City, which sits just across from the Pentagon. He did his normal thing, made us breakfast, got us ready for school, got dressed in his suit, and dropped us off. A few hours later, and it seemed as though the whole world had changed. I had caught a glimpse of the news that was playing in another classroom, and had heard rumors of a bomb going off at the Pentagon. They made an announcement that school was closing early and all the classes were to convene in the lunchroom. A lot of us had parents who worked there, so the anxiety in the lunchroom as we waited for our parents to pick us up was palpable. They called my name and I walked out to the pickup line to see my dad, dressed in his weekend clothes, waiting for me in our family van. The ride home was quiet as I couldn't think of anything to say, and my dad's face was set in a stoic expression the whole time, which was incredibly unusual for him. When we got home, it was only as he was putting the keys into our front door that I got the courage to ask why he was there to pick me up. And why wasn't he dressed in his suit? He paused for a second, then turned to me and said, "I was on my way to work when someone told me not to go in. I don't know who, but it was very clear, insistent that I go home, so I did." I stayed silent as we walked inside, up to our living room, and he turned on the TV. We did news coverage together in silence for, honestly, I don't remember how long. He finally left to go pick up my siblings from their school, and just before he left, I finally got the courage to ask about my mum, who worked at the Pentagon. He told me he hadn't heard anything from her yet, because the phone lines were busy, but that he was sure she was going to be okay. I stayed glued to the TV all day, and when my dad came back with my sisters, he joined me. Much later that evening, we went to pick up my mum. She was okay, but after initially being evacuated from the Pentagon, she had gone back with a few others to help in any way they could. The meetings my dad was supposed to be at, the ones he missed because an audible voice told him to go home, were hit by the plane that struck the Pentagon. Had it not been for that voice, I would have lost my dad, my rock, and the reason why I am still here today. I am forever grateful to the voice that told my dad not to go into work that day. Story 4. Not paranormal from the site, but my uncle was working in Cantor Fitzgerald when the plane hit. Nobody from that firm made it out. In the following weeks, after the family more or less accepted he was dead, even though he was still listed as missing, we all had visitation dreams. I can vividly remember mine, and I was only 12. He was very reassuring that everything was fine and he was where he needed to be. He still visits me in my dreams sometimes, albeit very infrequently now. My mum started talking to a medium a few years after and had stayed in touch since. Some of the discussions with her have been insane. I can't go into detail, but this woman has absolutely convinced me she has a connection to the other side. After my roommate in college passed, she called me out of the blue after asking my mum for my number because my roommate had a message for me. I'm not sure what happens after we die, but there is definitely something. Story 5. Worked in the Pentagon for 5 years, sometimes during overnight shifts, and that place is absolutely haunted. I worked in the counter-terrorism office that dealt with 9/11s and the immediate aftermath, and we had tons of relics from that day, but also from counter-terrorism operations over the last 2 decades in glass cases. There were many early mornings where I would be alone preparing for a brief at 3 a.m. and would just feel constantly like I was being watched, or would hear people talking or whispering, and no one else was in the office but me. Or I'd go to the bathroom at 1 to 2 a.m. and random stalls would slam, but no one was in there with me. A lot of people say that if you walk in the corridors that got hit alone at night, you can smell smoke. One of my best friends was working alone one night in the corridor that was hit, and could hear what sounded like people stampeding, running down the hallways, but no one was there. Story 6. I will never forget this occurrence. I was 14 years old and homesick on the morning of 9/11s. I specifically remember having a dream about a commercial airplane heading much too close for comfort over a very large city. I was watching the plane heading directly toward the building. I could hear the sounds, and someone next to me said, "That plane is about to hit that building on purpose." I remember feeling so sad in the dream because whoever said that next to me was definitely correct. I was then abruptly awakened by my grandfather. He handed me a glass of ice water and told me that planes had struck the World Trade Center in an apparent attack. What's also bizarre is that a year prior, my grandparents flew to New York City and stood atop the tower on a tour. I'll never forget that dream. I've had several other strange ones that ended up being premonitions. I don't know why this happens to me every 8 to 10 years or so. Story 7. I was a construction inspector for the WTC Memorial and Museum build. Several of us needed to sign NDAs concerning what several ironworker and mason crews experienced within the museum and hub transit system. I am one of those that signed it. Voices, a rush of footsteps, and a wind of nothing there. Constant missing tools and failing new rental equipment. Ear-splitting explosions with no source and no ear ringing. There is more. One time, the ironworkers tried to remove what appeared to be a woman in a suit dress squatting on the ground, covering her head. I heard about the squatting woman many times, but only seen her once. She wore a grey suit and had black hair. I saw a frightened beast of a man poke her with a spud wrench, and she became a goddamn stain on the new concrete we placed. That is all for today. If you have enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe. I post once a week or more, so if you like listening to stories while you work, I got you. Hope you have an absolutely amazing. You can check my other videos on screen.